Jai Ma. So we enter into the 13th chapter, that is Kshetragya Yoga. So as we have seen, the Bhagavad Gita goes in set of 6 chapters, 6 chapters, 6 chapters. And each time Shri Krishna brings the fundamental truth in a little more detailed way. I find this even otherwise a very interesting way of teaching something. Instead of giving the whole truth straight away, to slowly, gradually take the person into the details, reiterating, reaffirming, but also enlarging the scope. Aurobindo uses this method in the Life Divine and elsewhere also. So, what we have been told is that there is an individual soul, there is the Brahman, which is the reality, and there is nature, and the soul has to first come out of this state of ignorance and recover the Brahman, that is the immutable status, and beyond it is the Purushottama. This has been explained already. So now he goes into details of explaining the relation of soul and nature, and that is Purusha and Prakriti, and the relation of soul with the divine, what we call as the divine, but the Gita calls it Brahman and the Purushottama, and the relation of the Purushottama with this entire field and nature itself. So these are the things which are considered. And each of them is a stage in our evolutionary journey. So people, for example, often ask why God made this world cruel. So straight answer is that it's not that the world has been made cruel. There is in it danger and difficulty, no doubt. But there is a question of even of our perception, the way we perceive the world. And if we set right this perception, we may see the same thing very, very differently. So there is a status of the soul in ignorance, which is the first status. And when it is in ignorance, then it acts according to its operating system is the ego. The soul is identified with the ego, and the ego reacts through raga, dvesh, likes, dislikes, pleasure, pain, all these reactions which are natural to the ego. It is attached to family, it is attached to circumstances, and therefore its reactions are like that. So it cannot perceive the truth. This is the first status of the soul. So it must recover. From this status, it must enter into the state of immutable Brahman, that is a vast impersonality, and when it looks things from that state, things begin to appear different. At least the sting, the brunt, then everything including life and death looks like a circumstance in a great journey. So I know it sounds very, sometimes it can sound harsh, but that is the fact. When you look at it from that vastness, it's like when we look at these stars, we don't realize that we are watching many of the stars which have already died. And there are many stars which are alive, which we are not yet able to see, because their light will take some number of light years, sometimes 1,000,000 light years even to reach a planet. So we don't see it like that. But just imagine that if you were a cosmic discoverer, what one would see? One would see stars coming up and going away and then coming up like a Diwali cracker. So then the scene will be very different. So there is the way of looking at it changes completely. And then one goes beyond the immutable Brahman and discovers something yet greater, yet new. All that will be part of the Gita, this chapter. But the question Arjun asks, from which it's triggered, so that's very fascinating about the Gita, that based on the level of query comes the answer from the divine teacher. So it's important to have the quest, it's important to have the aspiration, because if we don't have the quest, if we don't have the question, so often this is how I put it that Aurobindo is not a teaching, of course, we know that, and Aurobindo is not a philosopher. Aurobindo is an answer. So, answer is there, but what is my question? It's important, because otherwise we may read everything of Aurobindo, yet we may just wonder, because I don't have a question. My question may be how to earn a good livelihood, lead a successful life. So I'm looking for an answer. Or my question may be, how does Sri Aurobindo connect with the Vedanta Siddhanta? So again, it's a wrong question. But if you ask the straight question, what is the sense of all this that we are experiencing? What is the sense of creation? What is the meaning and purpose of life? Straight entry we'll make into Sri Aurobindo, and everything will begin to make new sense. So Arjun asks a question, what is the relation between Purusha and Prakriti? That's what he has heard. It is also there in the Sankhya, which was the predominant method at that point of time. So he asks, after all, what is the relation between Purusha and Prakriti? Between the field and the knower? It means Arjun already has a hint about the other ways in which it is known. So it's a very beautiful description that the body is the field. By body is not meant the body only, but everything that is part of the larger nature. And because this body is a microcosm connected with the entire macrocosm, because every element of creation will be there. Actually, in every grain of sand, you will have all the elements of creation, this sheer logic, leaving aside the differentiation. So they will be repressed, held back in an undifferentiated state or differentiated state. That's the only difference, because there cannot be two origins. So in human beings is described as the microcosm. The macrocosm is the universe, and there is a interconnectedness. So this entire human field of workings of nature inside, that means the mind, the vital, the emotions, the personality, and the body, and all the other bodies, the vital body, mental body, all this is the field. So who is the knower of the field? Certainly not the soul in ignorance. So before we can pass either judgment on creation or judgment on God, we must develop the right perception, the right vision. So it's otherwise we'll be like that mother's story that somebody went to see a painting, and when he saw the painting, he said, this is so beautiful. And mother says that, he had no clue about what painting is about. Another painting where he says, I don't understand anything of it. Again, because he has no clue. So first thing is to know, to have the knowledge. And to have the knowledge, one must go to the knower. The status of the knower, at least. So, who is the knower? Knower is, of course, the supreme. But our soul, because it is a portion of the divine, it can also arrive at the status of the knower. Right now, it is held captive. So, it is watching things, whatever nature is showing. And it believes that to be true. Like Plato explained that, we are like in a cave, in a cave. And in a cave, imagine you are completely strapped and you cannot move, and whatever shadows are coming in front on the rock wall, you believe that's the only reality. So that is our state in ignorance. So first is to regain the stature of knowledge. So this also describes what are the conditions for gaining spiritual knowledge, the true knowledge, and what is its importance. And then Shri Krishna described the entire field of relation between the soul and nature, between the Brahman and this reality, and the highest status of the Lord. So this is the extremely practical chapter. So on the first page, the field and the knower, chapter 13 of part 2, and here page 409. We have the question of Arjun. So Arjun is therefore made to put a question which shall evoke a clearer elucidation of these still ill-lighted matters. He asks to learn of the Purush and the Prakriti. He inquires of the field of being and the knower of the field, and of knowledge and the object of knowledge. So he has asked this question now to Shri Krishna. So what has been already spoken so far, Sri Aurobindo summarizes, action being admitted. So action is an important integral part of the yoga journey. There is nothing like inaction. That has been right in the beginning made clear, that even if we sit and do nothing, we are still, something is happening, breath is happening, so many things are happening, heart is beating, muscles are twitching, all that is happening continuously. Now, Shri Krishna has also told us how to do these actions These actions are to be done as a yajna. That means not for any personal selfish purposes, but taken as an offering to God. So action being admitted, a divine action done with self-knowledge. So without self-knowledge, there is nothing like being an instrument of the divine. So without self-knowledge, we are only preparing ourselves to be instrument of the divine. That is the difference. So through Karma Yoga, we prepare ourselves to become an instrument of the divine. We don't become automatically instruments of the divine. Of course, we can believe whatever we want to believe, but that is only possible with self-knowledge. As the instrument of the divine will in the cosmos being accepted as perfectly consistent with the Brahmic status, page 410. So page 410, I am reading from the beginning of the chapter, the essence of the Gita's idea. So he has already revealed to us action being admitted. That means action is not to be renounced at any stage. A divine action done with self-knowledge as the instrument of the divine will in the cosmos being accepted as perfectly consistent with the Brahmic status. So he has said that even in the state of Brahman realization, action can continue in that state of divine knowledge and to express the divine will. Why does the yogi act? He doesn't act for any selfish purposes. He acts only to fulfill the divine will. And he takes it still further. And an indispensable part of the Godward movement, that action being uplifted inwardly as a sacrifice with adoration to the highest. How does this way practically affect the great object of spiritual life? So it has to be done with knowledge, divine knowledge, not the ordinary human knowledge. It has to be done to fulfill the divine will, and inwardly it must be a worship and adoration to the highest, not for any selfish purposes. As long as there is any selfish motive, it is not a yajna. Yajna by its nature means, sacrifice by its nature means that I am no more doing it for myself. I am doing it for the sake of the all, for the divine, for the world, whatever it be. And the divine will give me whatever prasad he has to give, and I'll receive it with gratitude. That makes it yajna. Otherwise, it's not a yajna, whether one is working in an ashram or one is working outside or anywhere in the world, it doesn't become yajna. It is still a selfish action. So this is the first thing that needs to be hammered into all of us constantly. What is the object? The rising from the lower into the higher nature, from mortal into immortal being. So he is raising a question, how does it affect this kind of a action? All life, all works are a transaction between the soul and nature. This is so interesting. So we thought of all these things, circumstances, people, this, that. No. It is the transaction between the soul and nature which is taking place. What is the original character of that transaction? What does it become at its spiritual culminating point? To what perfection does it lead the soul that gets free from its lower and external motives and grows inwardly into the very highest poise of the spirit and deepest motive force of the works of its energy in the universe? So these are the questions that have been raised directly, indirectly in the chapter, not necessarily in so many words, but always directly or indirectly. And Sri Aurobindo says very interestingly that these are the questions involved. Because when he asks what is the relation between Purusha and Prakriti, what is he asking? What happens to a self-realized man? Does he act or he doesn't act? Does he still need to continue with action or he needs to just withdraw? Because the purpose of action is over. That is how many people say that, purpose of action is to realize God. Now, if you have realized God, do you still need to act or you don't need to act? So these are the questions that are there. And Sri Aurobindo very beautifully says there are other questions which Gita does not raise because the time is not appropriate. Because Arjuna has not asked the questions based on material science. He has not asked what is the relation between what physics says and what is the spiritual vision, materialism, all this. Nothing is there. So he doesn't raise those questions. That's not the issue. So now he starts on next paragraph. This soul which finds itself here embodied in nature has a triple reality to its own self-experience. So what is this triple reality? First, it is bound. So when it is bound, it is simply at the mercy of nature. Wherever nature takes, the soul goes. Whatever it shows, the soul reacts, because it doesn't know it's a soul. It is completely identified with the cloak. It's like a person who feels he is the dress or he is the degree. So it is completely identified with the ego self, with the body, and so he reacts. He reacts. If the body is hurt, he thinks I am hurt. So if somebody, throws an insult, it feels I am insulted. Because it is so deeply attached to the ego self. So first it is a spiritual being apparently subjected by ignorance to the outward workings of Prakriti. Aurobindo uses the word apparently, because there is no real subjection of the soul. It's in its deepest sense always free, apparently because it has chosen to go into the school of nature. Hence it is apparently subjected. So the subjection which is there it's like a child agreeing to go to school. And so it is subject. If I travel to a country, I am subject to the laws and rules and regulations of the country. So I have gone by my own choice for some purpose. And represented inner mobility as an acting, thinking, mutable personality, a creature of nature and ego. So the moment we enter into this world, we get an identity immediately. Aadhaar card. We get a number and we get an identity, a name, a religion, a parentage, a surname, a religion, an ideology. All these things we get, the environment. So all this the soul attaches. So that makes a mutable personality. Mutable personality which will keep changing, growing, but on this basis it will grow. Now, these are things which are so important. There are some people for whom family ties were so important. That in my family, so for them that's the end of the world. Then some with racial identities, national identities, all this it gets immediately. So this is the first status, where it is a creature of nature and ego. The soul is not the ego, but it identifies itself. It thinks I am Mr. So and so, son of so and so, daughter of so and so, and everywhere on all the forms it is reinforced. You have to write. You can't write, I'm a child of the mother. Your status, you have to write, Mr. So-and-so, son of so-and-so, daughter of so-and-so. Next status, because Aurobindo has said, there is a triple status. Next, when it gets behind all this action and motion, it finds its own higher reality to be an eternal and impersonal self and immutable spirit, which has no other share in the action and movement than to support it by its presence and regard it as an undisturbed equal witness. So next status, and he tells us the process also, which is basically inward movement. So instead of being completely involved with all that is happening in the world outside, turn within. This is very interesting, because normally one will think if I turn within, I lose hold of the outer reality. But Aurobindo will explain to us that no, it will make you master of the outer reality. But that comes later. Right now, turn within, become a witness, look at this world of passing scenes and appearances. We have those lines in Savitri before she starts her journey to discover the soul, where it described that, obedient to a high command, she sat. Time, life and death were passing incidents. So then one has to take it, this is my dharma right now. Things will happen. My mind may react to them as good things, bad things, pleasant things, painful things. But I have to just tell this fellow, you don't know, just keep quiet. I want the true knowledge, the true understanding of what these things are. It will react because that's its nature. Habitually, it will start creating those reactions. So,
it means what? The soul, last line?
Yeah.
Last line, it gets behind all action.
Yes. The soul gets behind all action. So it has to learn to step back, to stand back, to become a witness. So it will begin to arrive at the second status, which is the status of a vast impersonality and an undisturbed equal witness. So it discovers that it is an eternal and impersonal self and immutable spirit. So thus far we see, it has been known, but there is a third status. And last, that's what we have seen in the Gita. Sri Krishna speaks of the three Purushas. So what? Because first you must say, what is Purusha? What is it about? And last, normally one would consider this is you are liberated, nothing more is required. But there is a third status, the last, when it looks beyond these two opposite selves. Why opposite? Because one is completely bound by ignorance, other is completely free. It's just a witness, it's unaffected by anything. So what is the joining link? We have been told this in previous chapters, but here once again Shri Krishna is reiterating. It discovers a greater ineffable reality from which both proceed. The eternal, who is self of the self and the master of all nature. We have these lines, both in Mother's prayers and Aurobindo's poem, Krishna, where he describes self of self. So it's here small self, here is the soul. Now where has the soul come from? What is the self of the soul? That is the capital S. And the master of all nature. So it is not cut off from nature. It is the Lord of nature. See now how things are changing. So in the Brahman status, it is cut off from nature. But in the higher status, it discovers the master of nature. And what is its relation to the master? Master of all nature and action. And not only the master, but the origin and the spiritual support and scene of these workings of his own energy in cosmos. Here his is about that supreme person. But the spiritual inhabitant, the origin and spiritual container, but the spiritual inhabitant in all forces, not only that reality, supreme reality is containing all this within itself, but it is also entered into each and every force. So literally everything that we see in the universe, whether it be the elements, whether it be objects, everything, the divine is inside them, as well as everything is contained within the divine. This is what it begins to discover. In all things and in all beings, and not only the inhabitant, but by the developments of this eternal energy of his being, which we call nature. Nature, we call it nature as something separate. But it is he who is brought out this energy from himself. All energies and forces, all things and all beings. So because everything comes in nature, which includes not only divine beings, undivine beings, all kinds of beings, forces, which our mind labels are nothing else but his manifestations through nature. Now he speaks of nature. This nature itself is of two kinds. One derived and inferior, another original and supreme. So the derived and inferior is what we experience. So what happens is that the supreme, that reality has become all this. So in becoming all this, there are two steps or stages. First is when it is in its own original splendor. Let us say the sun is releasing all its tremendous energy. But in that tremendous energy, life cannot blossom. It needs a little bit shade. So it gets filtered through different things and reaches here. As it gets filters, the sky assumes colors, all kinds of seasons come, but it's not the original. So that there is the original nature of the Lord, but it is, we may use an analogy, it is tremendous for us to even bear, let alone anything can blossom in it. And therefore there is a derivative nature which is more like, according to our level, we can handle it. So we start from here and reach there through the two-step procedure. There is a lower nature of the cosmic mechanism. So all this is also the Lord, but operating through the veil of lower nature, the entire cosmos. He is there in it, but he enters in it as if it's a subordinate movement. And that is Trigundamai Maya, which he will describe later on at great detail. So, in this lower nature, the jiva, the soul in Prakriti, it lives in a certain ignorance, conceives of itself as an ego of embodied mind and life, works under the power of the modes of nature, thinks itself bound, suffering, limited by personality, though he has not mentioned, but we can add in brackets, and therefore chained to the obligation of birth and the wheel of action. A thing of desires, transient, mortal, a slave of its own nature. So the law of karma apply as long as you think you are the doer. That's only the ego believes it's the doer. If you think you have done this, you are responsible for it. You can't escape. The law of karma will apply. The moment you step back and you are out of that, then karma will happen, all kinds of things will happen, but you are not bound by it. So that's the beauty of this entire teaching. He'll confirm this again and again. Above this inferior power of existence, there is a higher divine and spiritual nature of its own true being. Now comes this soul. We have known two status. One is in ignorance, second is as the Brahman, and third he has described the divine reality. But what is the status of the soul, individual soul, in that divine reality? Does it even have a poise, or does it just get annulled? So here Aurobindo says, in which this soul is forever a conscious portion of the eternal and divine. So this is the third status, beyond the Brahman status, where it discovers itself as an eternal child of the Divine Mother. How beautiful it is. And what is the state of that soul? In ignorance, it is filled with like, dislike, fear, happiness, sorrow, joy, grief. In that, what does it experience? Life blissful, free, superior to its mask of becoming, immortal, imperishable, a power of the Godhead. So in that third status, it knows this is a mask, the personality is a mask. It doesn't tell or need to tell anyone that, look here, I am no one, nothing. It is a mask. When people say, Mr. So-and-so, it understands. They think that the personality is responding, but it's not the personality. Personality becomes a mask which is necessary for action. To rise by this higher nature to the eternal. So you can go through this door to the eternal through divine knowledge, love and works, founded on a spiritual universality, is the key of the complete spiritual liberation. So this is the path he has shown. Status in ignorance, the Brahmic status. And the status of Brahman is not complete liberation. Yes, you are liberated from the cycle. But the real liberation is where you are not bound by any external condition, whether of birth or non-birth. That's how the Isha Upanishad puts it. As long as you have to just rely on being a witness and disappear, you are not really liberated. True liberation is where even in bonds you are free. So that's where the Gita is taking us. Now we turn the page. So this is about the soul. That is the Kshetragya. See, Krishna says that, the soul is the knower of the field. So what is the Kshetram? First, the whole of existence must be regarded as a field of the soul's construction and action in the midst of nature. The Gita explains the Kshetram field by saying that it is this body, which is called the field of the spirit, and in this body there is someone who takes cognizance of the field, Kshetragya, the knower of nature. So then he describes that this is not just the physical body, but at every level, and the body in all its vastness, it is the microcosm, so the entire universe dwells within the body. Now imagine, this changes the perspective. That means that all my medical knowledge, with all the details, all the degrees, it is still a ignorance. That's how the Gita describes. And I cannot know entirely about Prakriti till I have discovered that status from which Prakriti has emerged. So this is something very beautiful, that the whole field. So that's very clear that the Kshetra is everything. It is not just about, when I go inside, discover the divine, it's fine. But in outside action, I have to use whatever is available. A true knower of Brahman should be able to know everything. He should be able to understand medicine better, engineering better. Not only better, but in the true way. And that's what we see for the first time in Aurobindo and the Mother. They talk about human relationships, they talk about human psychology, they talk about sociology, they talk about democracy, capitalism, everything about the human body, about health, healing, everything. How are they able to know all this? Because they are talking about their own nature. From that higher and then the lower. So what we call as knowledge is actually ignorance. It is science of appearances, workable, practical, but ignorance. So this is what he is taking us to. Okay, so Prakriti is the Kshetra and the soul, and ultimately the divine himself is a Kshetragya. So, soul, why? Because it is a portion of the divine, but why automatically not the soul? Because in ignorance it's not the Kshetragya. It has to recover its true status. Now we turn to page 413. This is very cute because the Gita says, Shri Krishna says, ancient seers, Veda, Upanishads, Brahma Sutras, all of them say this. It's very interesting. So, of course, Brahma Sutras of Badrayan, where, it's like a concise, it's not concise, several slokas, but it's like if you want to understand the teaching of the Veda and the Upanishad in a very concise way, then the Brahma Sutras. Sri Aurobindo has appreciated this, Brahma Sutras. So he is summarizing that, see, what I am telling you, they have said. And then on page 413, 7th, 8th line, the Gita contents itself with a brief practical statement of the lower nature of our being in terms of the Sankhya thinkers. We have already touched this, so we'll just briefly run through what is the lower nature. It's composed of the 5 elemental states of matter. And of course, there is a primary state of matter also, pradhan, primordial matter. And there is the 5 elemental state, which we know, Akash, Vayu, Agni, Jala and Prithvi. Then to perceive this, there are the 5 senses which perceive this. And then there are the 5 karmendriyas, organs of action. But the interesting part, and then of course there is the ego and the intellect. So the interesting part is that means so long as this is my operating system, I am in lower nature. So long as my senses are what they are, I am in lower nature, whatever it be. There is a higher way of knowing things, which right now is not accessible. So that entire understanding, so senses, intelligence and ego, of course here intelligence is referring to the mental intelligence. There are also 5 objects of senses, another 5 different ways of sense cognizance of the world, and so on it goes on. A general consciousness that informs. Okay, we can read that. Then there is a general consciousness that first informs and then illumines the energy in its work. So there is a power of awareness through which we get to know things. It's a general consciousness, not the highest, but the general consciousness. There is a faculty of that consciousness by which the energy holds together the relations of objects. This is very fascinating. What is it that creates a coherent stream? A simple act like speaking coherently. What holds? What holds the coherence in our own life, that when a child, then we grew up, we may use the word memory, but still there is a power which holds these things as in an interconnected way. That I am connected with this, I am connected with that, and so on. And it can go on to include everything in this cosmos. But ordinarily, it gives us the sense of connectedness. So there is a power of that kind. These are the necessary powers of the field. All these are common and universal powers at once of the mental, vital and physical nature. See, all of us, that's how we make our own world. So we don't perceive the world as it is. We perceive it through the formation that we have of the world. So all of us have our own little world in which, our mind has created a certain kind of working understanding of things, of people with which it feels connected. Its way of connecting with God, its way of connecting with the body. And based on that, we are experiencing life. And therefore, what happens? Next line. Pleasure and pain, liking and disliking are the principal deformations of the Kshetra. And again, that wonderful example when the mother, there was this place, now it is tennis ground, which was dirty, it was a dumping place. And what does the mother see? She sees this possibility. And she gets that land on lease. And then they start working. Today it is so wonderful. It's even a prized prime property. So this is what was the deformation? Oh, this is a useless place. So we also about each other say, oh, this fellow is useless. That's not how the divine sees. It's our deformation. Likes, dislikes, sometimes they know so and so is a foreigner, so and so is an alien, so and so is not my jatwala, caste so and so is not my language. So they are likes, dislikes, they're all deformations. They are almost ingrained into the whole system. And based on that, we look at things, and this deforms the vision of the field, just like we are looking at the field wearing certain glasses. And the more tainted and the more twisted the glass, the more twisted the field. It's like when you observe your own image through a concave lens or a convex lens, you will see a very distorted image. So that's how we are. We are not seeing things as it is. So that is the deformation of the kshetra. Kshetra itself is not deformed. It is my perception which needs to change. From the Vedantic point of view, we may say that pleasure and pain are the vital or sensational deformations given by the lower energy to the spontaneous ananda or delight of the spirit when brought into contact with her working. So basically it is ananda. But because I have it in mind that I will get ananda only if I have ras madhuri, then already, my reactions are deformed. There is that story of Aurobindo when salt was not there and he ate the food, and later on the disciple tasted, oh, there was no salt in it. He says, yes, I know. Why didn't you say it? He said, there is a ananda of tastelessness. Only the Lord can say like that. So there is ananda. Even in what is outwardly suffering, there is ananda. In intense moments when we are freed from the clutch of the ignorance, like the movie Shava. So that fellow is being tortured brutally by all these Mughals. He is the son of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj and Aurangzeb. Their army is brutally torturing him, but he is unaffected. They don't know what to do with him. And he says, we dance with death as our gungru. You can't scare me with death. So that is when in intense moments, or when a child, a common thing is when a child is sick, however sick the mother would be, she will do things for the child. She will run around. Even if she is being, outwardly somebody will say, you are being tortured. She will say, nah Baba, first is this baby. So that is where she describes that, he describes that there is ananda behind. If we are shut in the prison of the lower nature, ignorance, ego identity, then there will be a pleasure and pain. Like when we work for the Divine Mother. There are people who work any amount. Duman Bhai with, he would have bleeding, he would go, rush, change the dhoti and rush for the work. Ask him, what are you doing? Don't you need rest? No. So you see how he is experiencing the ananda. That ananda he cannot sacrifice. He may get some rest, recover his health, so called. But he'll miss out on that ananda of mother's service. So this is how they have shown the way. That there is an ananda which is always there. We don't experience it because the ego deforms the kshetra. So the experience of the same situation, circumstances will be very different for a person who is bound and for a person who is freed. This is the essence of this part. And the same way, from the same viewpoint, that liking and disliking are the corresponding mental deformations given by her to the reactive will of the spirit that determines its responses to her contact. So like, dislike. So what does ego say? Oh, this work I like to do, this I don't like. So it doesn't take interest. But if we understand Samam Brahman, that the divine is pouring all his energy on everything, so every work becomes divine. So liking, dislike goes away because in every work we can really connect with the truth. So these are the deformations of the field. So we can Now turn to page 414, and now Shri Krishna reveals about the spiritual knowledge. What is the sign that somebody is in knowledge? Is it like he is sitting, closing his eyes, cut off from people, not doing any work? No, that's not the sign. Look at, signs are inward. We start this second paragraph. The Gita then tells us, page 414, the Gita then tells us what is the spiritual knowledge, or rather it tells us what are the conditions of knowledge, the marks, the signs of the man whose soul is turned toward the inner wisdom. So these are the well-recognized signs. What are these? His strong turning away of the heart from attachment to outward and worldly things. Again, he is in the midst of everything, but he is attached to nothing. This, in fact, the need to physically stay away means you are attached. He is inwardly free. He doesn't need to, whether the thing is there or not there, it doesn't make a difference to him. His inward and brooding spirit, he is not engaged with all kinds of, discussions and, things which generally people give so much importance. He is in inward and brooding spirit. It's reflecting on higher things. His steady mind and calm equality, the settled fixity of his thought and will upon the greatest inmost truths, upon the things that are real and eternal. So if something comes to his mind which is of a very temporary nature, maybe he'll momentarily engage and it doesn't occupy any space. He's occupied with the eternal, the permanent. And there comes a certain moral condition, a sattvic government of the natural being. Sattvic is somebody who always seeks harmony and balance and equilibrium. Not rajasic is I'll fight out, I'll conquer, ambition or excessive attachment, pity. All this is a very rajasic kind of movement. Sattvic is a dealing with life which is of a calm, balanced, harmonious, trying to build equilibrium. There is fixed in him a total absence of worldly pride and arrogance. So the sense of doership goes away. So there is no worldly pride. I am somebody, I am someone. It doesn't come at all. A candid soul, I would say a childlike soul. A child is candid. There is nothing to hide for a child. A tolerant, long-suffering and benignant heart. He doesn't carry in his heart all that jealousy and pride and anger and all those things. So it prefers to bear the burden of suffering happily if need be. Purity of mind and body, no bad intent towards anyone. That's purity of mind and body. No selfish, egoistic motives. Tranquil firmness and steadfastness. Self-control and a masterful government of the lower nature, and the heart's worship given to the teacher, whether to the divine teacher within or to the human master in whom the divine wisdom is embodied, for that is the sense of the reverence given to the Guru. It comes naturally to somebody who is a seeker of knowledge or has the knowledge, both things. The Gita says who has the knowledge. And Sri Aurobindo adds to a conditions for the knowledge. So if one doesn't have, fine, it's your choice, but then you don't fulfill the condition of knowledge. As simple as. There is no punishment. If you want knowledge, these are the conditions. If you don't, it's fine. Live in ignorance, it's your choice. So that's how it is. Then there is a nobler and freer attitude toward the outward world, an attitude of perfect detachment and equality, a firm removal of the natural being's attraction to the objects of the senses, and a radical freedom from the claims of that constant clamorous ego sense, ego idea, ego motive which tyrannizes over the normal man. It's a tyranny, actually. Because the mind is running restlessly. I want this, I want that, I have this latest update, upgrade, phone, new things. So it is always in a state of inner tyranny. And then comes this. There is no longer any clinging to the attachment and absorption of family and home. It's not that the person has to move out of the home to prove. No. He's not clinging. He's not like people take so much interest in, what's my son doing? Sometimes they say, I really don't know. I mean, I can tell you what difference does it make? But there is that absorption. People keep a list of all their family members. God knows, how many. Ultimately, if you join, you'll join the whole earth. Everybody is connected to somebody or the other ultimately, and to all the creatures. But no, not that way. Absorbing interest all the time about what's happening within the family. There is instead, now Aurobindo says something very funny. There is instead of these vital and animal movements. What are these vital and animal movements? This includes family. So when family attachment drops off, Aurobindo says it's a kind of release. Because it's based on birth, circumstances of birth. You are calling them your family because you are born in these conditions. Who knows what the person was in another life? Who knows what the person would be in. Today you give so much love. Maybe he was your enemy and he has come today to settle an old score. Sometimes they say that he has come to drain you in this way because he was an enemy, now he has come. So all these things, he says, are vital animal movements. Okay, so instead of these, there is an unattached will and sense and intelligence, a keen perception of the defective nature of the ordinary life of physical man, with its aimless and painful subjection to birth and death and disease and age, a constant equalness to all pleasant and unpleasant happenings. So he says life, that's the nature of life. It's imperfect, it's limited. So you can't expect anything to be more than a very limited version. So expectation sees away. And finally, few lines below, there is a strong turn within toward the things that really matter. We see how the perception is different. We keep on asking the divine, what job should I take? What does the divine want? What kind of work I should do? Whom should I marry? That also people ask. Divine is a marriage bureau. Whom should you marry? It doesn't matter. From the divine point of view, it's absolutely irrelevant. I mean, some little relevance. Your job, the money you are getting, your profession, and person you are marrying, all this is so unimportant. So what matters? So he's saying things that really matter. In that list, there is none of these things. What really matters? A tranquil, things that really matter. A philosophic perception of the true sense and large principles of existence. A tranquil continuity of inner spiritual knowledge and light. The yoga of an unswerving devotion, love of God, the heart's deep and constant adoration of the universal and eternal presence. So this is how such a person reacts. To give just an example, that philosophical understanding vis-a-vis relationship. Supposing a person is married and husband or wife go away, or something happens like that, then the ordinary reaction will be, oh, so-and-so rejected me, refused me, or was such horrible, and for years you are carrying a useless burden. But if you have a philosophical temperament, you'll say, such is the nature of life, it's imperfect. Everybody has a right to seek their own truth, in their own way. You will not start switching on to the sad songs of yesteryears. Maybe you will be happy. Now I am free. These reactions will be so different. Once you are awakened to a self-knowledge, it will be very, very different than something which is very dear is taken away. You'll say, thank God. One attachment which I could not. That's how Aurobindo says when he's in the jail. He says, I was very attached to this work of liberating India. You have taken away this one bond that could hold me back. It's a completely different way of looking at life. So this is where it is, that it is turned toward the eternal and not the transient. And when we do that, then what do we discover? Page 416, what is the knowledge that comes? What is Brahman? What is that reality? So this is on page 416, almost after the middle. you discover that all is the eternal Brahman. This is a powerful passage. He's describing the Brahman, a spirit who immeasurably fills. Interesting, Aurobindo, each word. Not a spirit that immeasurably fills. A spirit who. It's a being, it's conscious. A spirit who immeasurably fills and surrounds all this movement with himself. For indeed the movement too is himself, and who throws on all that is finite the splendor of the garment of infinity. A bodiless and million-bodied spirit, whose hands of strength and feet of swiftness are on every side of us, whose heads and eyes and faces are those innumerable visages which we see wherever we turn, whose ear is everywhere, listening to the silence of eternity, and the music of the worlds is the universal being in whose embrace we live. What a wonderful, this is a meditation. This is, if just we remember this passage, all around it's that one reality. So soul and nature are simply its devices. There you discover it's relating, playing with itself. And the soul as the eternal portion and nature as its subordinate movement. Nature as we understand or experience is simply devices for its own play. Page 417. He is attached to nothing, bound by nothing, fixed to nothing that he does, calm. He supports in a large and immortal freedom all the action and movement and passion of his universal Shakti. He becomes all that is in the universe. That which is in us is he, and all that we experience outside ourselves is he. The inward and the outward, the far and the near, the moving and the unmoving, all this he is at once. He is the subtlety of the subtle, which is beyond our knowledge. Even as he is the density of force and substance, which offers itself to the grasp of our minds. He is indivisible and the one, but seems to divide himself in forms and creatures, and appears as all these separate existences. All things can get back to him, can return in the spirit to the indivisible unity of their self-existence. All is eternally born from him, upborn in his eternity, taken eternally back into his oneness. He is the light of all lights and luminous beyond all the darkness of our ignorance. He is knowledge and the object of knowledge, the spiritual supramental knowledge that floods the illumined mind and transfigured it is this spirit manifesting himself in light to the force obscured soul which he has put forth into the action of nature. This is a meditation, this is not for description. Couple of lines below. When man sees this eternal and universal Godhead. So what is the, after this realization, what happens? So somebody who has experienced this, then he will lead a normal life. What happens to his, dealing? Does he get bound again? Now comes the master stroke. When man sees this eternal and universal Godhead within himself, when he becomes aware of the soul in all things and discovers the spirit in nature, when he feels all the universe as a wave mounting in this eternity and all that is as the one existence, he puts on the light of Godhead and stands free in the midst of the worlds of nature. A divine knowledge and a perfect turning with adoration to the divine is the secret of the great spiritual liberation. So to turn toward the divine for knowledge with love and adoration will lead us, where will it lead us to? Spiritual liberation, freedom, love and spiritual knowledge. So this is where we are destined to reach, and so basically it is, if we are attached to appearances, we will be bound to the cycle of ignorance, to suffering. We'll be susceptible to suffering and pleasure and pain, both. And if we learn to be detached to appearances and attached to the Lord, the master of all existence. We are free even in bonds. That's the basic sum and substance. Last passage we can read, page 418. This knowledge comes by an inner meditation through which the eternal self becomes apparent to us in our own self-existence. So one method he's saying is through meditation. So there are other methods equally, not only one method. Or it comes by the yoga of the Sankhyas, the separation of the soul from nature. Or it comes by the yoga of works in which the personal will is dissolved through the opening up of our mind and heart. If we cannot do any of these things, there is an option. Plan B. Last line. The spiritual knowledge may be awakened by the urging of the spirit within us. It's called to this or that yoga, this or that way of oneness, or it may come to us by hearing of the truth from others and the molding of the mind into the sense of that to which it listens with faith and concentration. For however arrived at, it carries us beyond death to immortality. So people may say that how can it come by listening to others? Simply because there is one reality only. There are no two realities. So it may come from any side, any source. It may be urging from within or it can be listening. So any which way it can come. That is the true seeing. So now he says that who really knows, who has realized this state. That is the true seeing. The seeing of that in us which is eternal and immortal. As we perceive more and more this equal spirit in all things, we pass into that equality of the spirit. As we dwell more and more in this universal being, we become ourselves universal beings. Okay, last line on page 419. That what is the state of such a person? As the all-pervading ether. Now, ether is the subtle truth, but we can use the word space. Space is more tangible to understand. As the all-pervading ether is not affected or changed by the multiple form it assumes. Space is in everything, including atoms. Space is between the cells, space is between breath, everywhere there is space. But it is unaffected, it is space. So space is not affected or changed by the multiple forms it assumes, but remains always the same pure, subtle, original substance. Even so, the spirit, when it has done and become all possible things, remains through it all the same pure, immutable, immutably subtle, infinite essence. So this is the great teaching of the field and the knower.